The channel One Race, Human Race, All Human. Today is Thursday, July 7th, 2022. The answer is the oneness of all humanity. The answer is life, liberty for all people. Everyone has a right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Everyone on this planet. The answer is a program. Ads, commercials that say we're all one. We're all human beings. And everyone has a right to live on this earth. The answer is to vote economics, not color or something else that's stupid, but vote economics. Who's to make sure you have a job? Healthcare, free healthcare, housing, education, all these things. Who's concerned about you from the womb to the tomb? That's the Democratic Party. But you have to speak to people and talk to people. And you have to defeat the Southern strategy that divides people and bring people together and set up organizations and to have commercials, ads, and to respond to falsehoods. There's one race, that's the human race. Everyone has a right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That's a truth, a great truth.
The January 6th committee hearings have made familiar a rogues gallery of obscure Trump world figures who aren't actually that obscure at all in right-wing circles. Take longtime Republican attorney Cleta Mitchell, who was central to Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the election. She was also in the news this week as one of the 7 Trump allies and attorneys subpoenaed by a grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia, in the investigation of election interference there. It turns out Cleta Mitchell is still working to disrupt the next election and the one after that. In May, the New York Times reported that Mitchell is recruiting and training an army of poll watchers through an effort ironically called the Election Integrity Network, a project of the Conservative Partnership Institute, known as CPI. It's not just home to Cleta Mitchell. It also employs former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, and its related groups are home to a slew of familiar MAGA world names that are now even more familiar due to the January 6th committee investigation. The CPI-funded Center for Renewing America employs Jeffrey Clark, the Justice Department lawyer who tried to install himself as Attorney General to do Trump's bidding, and former Trump Pentagon Chief of Staff Kash Patel. Meanwhile, its associated America First Legal Foundation is run by, wait for it, Stephen Miller, of child separation policy and suing to prevent black farmers from receiving government assistance fame. The CPI is led by a figure with long ties to the right-wing policy echo chamber, former South Carolina Senator Jim DeMint, a Tea Party hero who left the Senate to run the Heritage Foundation, only to get the boot for being too close to Trump. It's no surprise, then, that the CPI has close ties with version 2.0 of the Tea Party, the House Freedom Caucus, co-founded by none other than Mark Meadows during his days in Congress. Several members of the Freedom Caucus have already been subpoenaed by the January 6th committee: Jim Jordan, Scott Parry, and Andy Biggs. In other words, a lot more names that we'll likely hear again as the January 6th committee investigation continues. A new report from Grid News looked into the many ties to the Conservative Partnership Institute that have made it a veritable clubhouse for insurrectionists. Maggie Severns, policy reporter for Grid, joins me now, along with Kurt Bardella, advisor to the DNC and the DCCC. Maggie, thank you for being here. My social media producer actually shared this with the team, and I was fascinated by it, read it, and then reread parts of it. Talk about the CPI. Who are they, and what about this clubhouse that they're running in D.C.?
Yeah, thanks so much, Joy. This is really a story about, I would say, the organization and the money that's been behind a lot of things that we've seen in the lead up to January 6th, on January 6th, and after in these efforts to push back against the January 6th investigations. We looked and we found 10 different organizations all connected to a single townhouse on Capitol Hill that is being leased by CPI. But there are, as you mentioned, a bunch of different groups and PACs. The House Freedom Caucus runs its PAC out of there that all kind of lead back to one place.
Now, they got money from Donald Trump, this sort of slush fund that he created, this $250 million that we've discovered through the committee. They got like $1 million of it. So do you know who else are their donors?
Yeah, we know a little bit about their donors. As you just noted, Trump raised a whole lot of money after the last election. He gave $1 million to CPI, which actually makes him one of the largest known donors to the organization. And then there are a couple other really big name GOP donors like Richard Uihlein, who has backed Trump and some other pretty far right candidates in recent years. He's put millions and millions of dollars into elections. He gave CPI $1.25 million, we know. A lot of this, CPI and the affiliated organizations are, some of them are what you call dark money groups, so they aren't actually required to their donors. We do know that it's grown in pretty short order to being a $20 million plus organization over the last couple of years.
And Kurt, what's interesting, it's also kind of a home for the B-list level, if I can be unkind for a moment, of people who worked for Donald Trump, who when they left didn't get picked up by the Heritage Foundation or Cato Institute or sort of the traditional places that people leave after they leave a White House. They wind up here. And so this place is like scooping up people who, let's just face it, would not be like presidents of universities after leaving the Trump White House. What do you make of this kind of, it's like the collection of like the Matt Gaetz Friends Club?
Yeah, I think if you're the B list in the Trump world, that means you're probably the D list everywhere else. And that's exactly what this group is. And really, let's call it for what it is. It's a safe harbor for domestic terrorists who want to help lead and incite an insurrection and are plotting to do so probably again in the not too distant future. All the while, it's also a mechanism to keep the grift that is Donald Trump going and have another satellite, another tentacle for him to continue to raise money, funnel money, and watch people enrich themselves off of Trump. It always astounds me, Joy, that people send this guy money, because all he does with it is turn it around and either give it to himself or just give it to his staff, and nothing actually happens with it. It is the ultimate grift, and that's why these entities really exist. And in many ways, too, it's just the almost the legal defense fund in waiting for these people who are coming under the microscope and examination of the January 6th committee.
And Maggie, speaking of that, a lot of people are running podcasts out of there. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, they're using this building in D.C. to basically kind of run other little mini businesses and media entities, right?
Yeah, I think that's an important aspect of our story, is that really this is part communications machine, right? For a lot of people that you're seeing out there, people like Lauren Boebert, who tapes her podcast there. They do TV hits out of CPI. And you have just a chorus of people like Mark Meadows, who have very large Twitter followings. At times you can really see folks pushing back against things that we're seeing kind of in concert. And it's interesting because you feel like all these voices are coming from different directions. And one thing we noticed in our story is that sometimes it'll be for people who work for different organizations underneath CPI, right? So it feels like all these disparate voices, but it's really kind of a chorus coming from one place.
Right, and I was saying in the break, Kurt, and I say this to my poor team all the time, that I think one of the biggest stories that the media did really miss was the Tea Party, and the way that this Koch-funded, sort of fake grassroots network really ate up the Republican Party, and now it is the majority of kind of the base of the party, and now MAGA is the new version of it that's taken it over as well. You've now got Mark Meadows, who is the OG Tea Party, you're trying to start a House Freedom Caucus in Georgia, trying to sort of metastasize that same way of doing politics into the states. We know Arizona's already been gobbled up by the same kind of MAGA weirdness. Why do you suppose the Republican Party they are so efficient at taking extremism, marketing it, and then shipping it out to the states, and these kind of bizarre ideas taking hold? Democrats don't really do that.
Yeah, I always say that, there is more of us than there are of them, but the little amount that they have is so well organized. And it's a playbook that we saw, like you pointed out, in the earlier part of the 2010 decade, where, it was kind of from the ground up. They would work at the state and local level. They work with big entities that would fund them, like the Koch Foundation and the Koch brothers. And they were able to transform, really, the Republican Party beneath all of our noses, really. And now that they have the reins of power in so many places and state houses, they're now reduplicating that playbook and applying it to the here and now. It's why they're why certain MAGA candidates are endorsing school board candidates now. I mean, that's how granular this really gets for them, and it's something that Democrats are going to have to contend with in the future, no matter what happens in the 2022 election. There is a whole giant effort right now that's organized that's targeting every down ballot race in every major state that we care about, and if we don't match up with that, we're going to have major problems going forward, and we're going to continue to see this pattern of extreme minority views being imposed on the majority of us.
Yeah, DeSantis is on that school board thing where he's trying to decide who's going to be on the school boards in Florida. Look, last word to you on this, Maggie. You talked about some of the things that they're behind. Is that, attacking critical race theory, some of the usual stuff. Is there a sort of coherent set of things that these folks that are connected to this organization that they want done to society?
I think you could ask that same question about kind of the broader Republican Party right now. Like you said, we see a lot of kind of anti-wokeness out of these groups. We see a lot, some suits around trans rights or immigration, kind of a social policy there. But I think that a lot of this, a lot of the messaging we're seeing come out of CPI right now is really kind of an anti-messaging more than being pro a lot of things. You see a lot of people arguing against the January 6th committee, arguing against what happened in the 2020 election, and then starting to also build some building blocks. You mentioned Cleta Mitchell's group towards the next election and what, I think they would call election integrity, but some people fear will be interference in the election or attempts to.
Yeah, that's the difference between them and the Tea Party. Because the Tea Party basically was a set of people who were out there protesting, but in the end, they really wanted what the Koch brothers wanted, which is deregulation and tax cuts for the rich. That's what they really actually wanted. They just did all the theatrical stuff for show. Maggie Severance, excellent reporting. Thank you very much for being here. Kurt Bardella, my friend, thank you very much. Still ahead.
So what's needed is a strategy, right? A campaign that says, hey, thank a Democrat. If you have health care, thank a Democrat. You have Social Security, thank a Democrat. If you have Medicare, thank a Democrat, right? All different programs that we have. Family Act, thank a Democrat. And then you have also the cancellation culture going on with the Republican Party. How they're canceling, women and canceling other people, canceling your right to vote. I mean, there's so many things there. And then you have what Truman did in 1948, talk about the Know Nothing Party, that Do Nothing Party, right? That they're doing nothing. What's the plan to help people? What did President Biden do? The American Rescue Plan, right? No Republicans voted for that. Explain what that is and how it helped get us out of COVID-19 and how it put people back to work. Talk about the great things that you've done and explain it to people. And then lift up, one race, a human race, all human. We are a multiracial, multicultural, multi-ethnic society. America belongs to everyone, and that everyone has a right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And then when it comes to the Christians, all right, and those who are your white evangelicals, you don't have to get all of them, but some of them, and remind them that, hey, Jesus said, love God, love your neighbor yourself. Who's your neighbor? Go to Luke chapter 10, right? The Good Samaritan. He's the hero, right? Not the preacher, not the deacon, but the Good Samaritan, who show compassion, concern for the person in need. And that's what a Christian's supposed to do, right? The golden rule, right? Helping people the way you want to be helped, okay? These are things that's why you need the Build Back Better Act passed and different programs where we're getting people out of poverty, getting children out of poverty. Listen, there's more that brings people together than divides. And you can't allow something like melanin, someone's skin tone, okay, or their language to divide people. You have critical Irish theory, where the Irish were discriminated against. Critical Italian theory, Italians were mistreated also, right? All people have a right to be treated equally with dignity and respect. This is America, the greatest nation on the face of the earth, and the last great hope of all humanity. Thank you for being on my YouTube channel, One Race, Human Race, All Human. Today is Thursday, July 7th, 2022.